This is the story of a man who thought he was a cop, a lawyer, a judge, and an action hero, all because he had a plastic badge and a golf cart with a flashing light. You know those neighborhoods with HOAs, homeowners associations, right? The kind of place where if you hang the American flag at the wrong 5-degree angle, you'll get a warning letter in red ink, where a single unruly blade of grass could land you in community court. Well, that's where my wife and I had lived peacefully for 22 years. Until that fateful Sunday. The weather was beautiful. No rain, birds chirping, not a soul disturbing the peace. I was mowing the lawn, my wife was making tea, and our daughter, Alyssa, had come home for a visit. Everything was perfect until disaster rolled in on 4 wheels. HOA Carl. Carl is the type of guy who, if you give him a walkie-talkie and a polo shirt that says security, he thinks he's Delta Force. He's 58, retired early, used to work in insurance, and now he's reemerged with a self-given title, Neighborhood Protector. He patrols in a golf cart with flashing yellow lights, wears sunglasses all day, even at 6 p.m., and carries a Glock because security. No one questions why. The HOA calls him a volunteer. I call him a real-life cosplay cop. Now back to Alyssa, my daughter, who Carl didn't know was his worst nightmare wearing sneakers and a hoodie, now stepping out of a black SUV. Alyssa isn't your typical daughter coming home for a visit. She's an FBI agent. Full name, Tactical Commander Alyssa Rains from the Hostage Rescue Team. She served overseas, defused bombs, worked as a sniper, and rescued hostages from terrorists with nuclear weapons. The stuff Carl watches on Netflix, Alyssa's done it 3 times before breakfast. But to Carl, a woman in a hoodie carrying a duffel bag? Clearly, a criminal breaking in. So there he was, in full old man in a golf cart mode, speeding in to block her car like it was some B-grade action flick. Except this time, he wasn't the main character. This is Carl, the man who believed that a tin badge from Amazon and a loud voice were all it took to be sheriff. Carl isn't a thief. He's not a mercenary. He's definitely not a retired Navy SEAL from Team 6. No, Carl is a textbook HOA uncle, a clean background check, but a mind that's a little off the grid. Before becoming the supreme protector of the neighborhood, Carl worked in insurance, the kind of job where you talk on the phone more than with your own wife. But once retired, he discovered a whole new calling, part-time patrol hero on a golf cart. For some mysterious reason, the HOA handed Carl a polo shirt embroidered with HOA Security, size M, though he really needs an XL. A 2-way radio he mostly uses to talk to himself, and most importantly, imaginary authority. Carl launched his patrol career like it was a one-man TV drama, self-produced and starring himself. He wrote citations for residents whose trash bins were on the curb 3 minutes early. He threatened to tear down kids' treehouses for violating HOA construction codes. And his crowning glory? He photographed a cat pooping in the wrong place, then filed a 4-page report to the board. Carl wasn't just a Karen. He was Karen with testosterone and an inkjet badge. And in Carl's eyes, anyone unfamiliar in the neighborhood was either a criminal, a vandal, or a gang member disguised as a yoga instructor. So when Alyssa, my daughter, pulled up in a sleek black SUV, parked in our driveway, wearing a hoodie and carrying a duffel bag, Carl went full CIA sleeper agent activation mode. No ID check, no questions, no thinking, just action. He sped toward her in his golf cart, all 12 miles per hour of it, blaring the horn like he was chasing an international jewel thief, then parked it sideways like Fast and the Furious Retirement Edition. Just as Alyssa opened her door, Carl was already there, hand on his gun, yelling, "Stop! Who are you? This is private property." Now remember, this is a woman who once rescued 4 hostages surrounded by extremists with machine guns. Alyssa turned calmly, still smiling. "I'm the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs. I'm just visiting home." But Carl wasn't listening. Carl had entered full-on suburban Rambo mode. "You can't be here. This is an HOA violation." Alyssa blinked, and Carl, he drew his weapon and pointed it at a federal agent. Ladies and gentlemen, there are defining moments in a man's life. For Carl, this was the moment he dug his own grave, with trembling hands still on the gun. And I, watering the garden just a few feet away, heard my daughter speak. Calm, steady, and without a hint of fear. "Sir, put the weapon down. I'm a federal agent. You're making a very big mistake." And Carl, the man who just pulled a gun on the wrong person, had no idea who he was about to face. You know what's more dangerous than a man with a gun? A man with a gun who doesn't know he's pointing it at the FBI. Carl stood there, feet wider than his shoulders, eyes bulging, hands trembling on his Glock like he was in the middle of Fallujah. Not on my front lawn, where a maple tree was shedding leaves and a corgi in a sweater just waddled by. Alyssa? She stood tall, no backing up, no crouching, didn't even reach for her bag. Just calm, like she was talking to a toddler caught sneaking chocolate from the fridge. Sir, I repeat, I am a federal agent. You are in violation of federal law. Lower your weapon now. And Carl? Carl roared like he'd just been cast as the lead in an 80s action movie. I don't care who you are! I'm in charge of security in this HOA. Excuse me, Carl? She used to be in charge of security for a military zone in Afghanistan. You once secured the neighborhood by yelling at a 7-year-old for riding his bike too fast. By then, my wife and I had run out of the house. I yelled, "That's my daughter." My wife? She'd already called 911 by the 3rd second, voice colder than Alaskan frost. We have a man from the HOA cosplaying as police and pointing a gun at a real federal agent. Yes, I'm serious. Meanwhile, neighbors started gathering like it was a live reality stream. An old lady lifted her phone to record, popcorn in hand. A man mumbled, "Dear God, I think she's military." Another whispered, "I think he's living in a movie." The air was tight, like a wire ready to snap. One twitch from Carl, and it could all end. But Alyssa didn't flinch. Hands up, voice steady, not a hint of fear. You are committing 2 federal offenses, armed threat and impersonating law enforcement. Are you sure you want to continue? Carl hesitated, and in his eyes, just for a moment, a flicker of doubt. Maybe he finally realized this woman wasn't afraid of him. That badge on her belt wasn't bought on eBay. And those people filming? They weren't going to cut the scene at minute 90 like his imaginary movie. But by then, it was too late. The sirens wailed. 3 patrol cars arrived. Red and blue lights flickered across Carl's pale face. Then, a cop stepped out with a loudspeaker. "Drop the weapon! Hands behind your head! Now!" Carl froze, like a CPU that just crashed from a reality overload. Alyssa calmly nodded to the officer, pointed to her waist. FBI badge. Agent Rains, Federal Hostage Rescue Team. The officer nodded back, walked up, and cuffed Carl without a single word of apology. Carl tried to say something, probably, "I thought she was breaking in," but his voice was drowned out by the click of handcuffs, a sound that rang like an alarm bell for every HOA in the neighborhood. I stood there, hands shaking. My wife hugged Alyssa. And Alyssa? She just shrugged. Scared men with guns, Dad. Most dangerous kind. You think the story ended when Carl got cuffed and tossed into the back of a patrol car? Oh no. In our HOA, the real drama always happens behind the scenes. The next day, the headline "HOA Carl pulls gun on FBI agent" exploded across the local social media like someone had found Kane in the HOA president's koi pond. Footage from the doorbell cam, with Carl yelling and Alyssa calmly raising her hands, hit the front page of the Facebook group, Neighborhood Watch, but make it drama. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through the comments with a satisfied little smirk. But the HOA board? Probably downing antacids like candy. That afternoon, they called an emergency meeting. Not to apologize, God forbid, but to clarify the misunderstanding. At the meeting, President Linda, hair bun tighter than her ban on backyard barbecues, stood up and delivered her statement like she just won the HOA Statewide Leadership Award. Carl acted based on an immediate sense of danger. We regret the misunderstanding. However, we also believe the other party may have responded with insufficient cooperation. Excuse me? Inadequate cooperation is when you don't open the gate fast enough, not when someone points a gun at your face. What Linda didn't know was that my daughter doesn't sit quietly while people rewrite the truth, especially not when the public is watching. So 3 days later, Alyssa returned. No hoodie this time. She came in full FBI uniform, tactical boots, ballistic vest, gleaming nameplate catching the afternoon sun. Like Marvel just introduced a new character, Agent Calm but Deadly. She stood on the steps of City Hall. No fancy microphone. No press entourage. Just one steady sentence, clear as a mission debrief. I'm Agent Rains with the FBI. On insert date, a man pointed a firearm at me while I stood outside my parents' home. I identified myself. He refused to lower the weapon. Now he'll face the consequences. She didn't need to shout. Truth, when worn with a tactical vest and backed by a dozen eyewitnesses, is the kind of weapon no one argues with. I'll never forget the look on Linda's face that day, like she'd just swallowed an ice cube whole. She turned away, and 1 week later, she resigned. Official reason? Community pressure. Sure, let's call it that. Carl? Charged. 2 federal offenses. No plea deal. No leniency. And the HOA? Their insurance company issued a statement. We are not liable for individual actions that exceed authorized authority. Translation: you're paying your own legal fees, folks. The HOA patrol program? Dismantled. Golf cart? Hauled back to the storage unit. Badge? Revoked. Walkie-talkie? Nobody dares turn it on anymore. So there you have it. All it took was one overreaching HOA, one federal agent home for a visit, and one gun in the wrong hands. And Carl's cosplay cop dream shattered in under 72 hours. You know what happens when an organization that once thought of itself as the right hand of justice gets exposed in front of the entire neighborhood? That's right, it melts, like vanilla ice cream under the July sun. After the Carl incident, it was like our whole neighborhood woke up from the HOA dream. Well, more like an HOA nightmare. We started looking around. At the bulletin boards stuffed into mailboxes, the violation notices for uneven grass patches, and those letters in Times New Roman, font size 12, dripping with fake courtesy but soaked in veiled threats. Suddenly, it all felt ridiculous. And then it happened. People started laughing. Not the cheerful kind of laugh, but the kind that says, "Oh my God, how did I live like this for years?" And the HOA? Oh, they tried. Really, they did. They hosted a community engagement meeting at the town center. Cookies were served, sweet tea too. And the opening speech began. We are deeply sorry for the incident and are currently reviewing our internal processes to ensure transparency. It sounded less like a neighborhood group and more like a tech company after a data leak. Except this wasn't leaked data. This was a retired man, untrained, holding a loaded Glock and threatening citizens. From the back row, I watched people shaking their heads. Some were recording live. And when they said, Carl simply made a temporary misjudgment, a man with glasses raised his hand and cut in. Temporary? He pointed a gun at the FBI. Do you people realize he almost got shot? Nobody answered. And honestly, they didn't need to. In the days that followed, there were no protests, no picket signs. But the neighborhood started to change, quietly and deliberately. People took down the HOA signs from their gates. Community meetings? Held without inviting the HOA. Old group chats were renamed from HOA alerts to Neighborhood No BS. Someone even printed t-shirts that read, "Thanks, Carl, for showing us who the real threat was." I ordered 3. 1 for me, 1 for my wife, 1 for Alyssa. Alyssa remained calm, as always. She didn't post online, didn't demand apologies, didn't file lawsuits. She just said one thing to me, one quiet afternoon as she sat cleaning her boots on our porch steps. You know what's scarier than a gun, Dad? Someone with a gun who believes the rules don't apply to them. I nodded, and together we looked out at the yard, where once stood the sign that said no children playing without permission? OA. It was gone. And the kids? They were kicking a soccer ball, laughing, rolling in the grass, shouting at the top of their lungs. And I swear to you, I had never seen our neighborhood feel this peaceful. Carl disappeared. No one knows where he went, and no one really asked. A man who once yelled, "Everyone must obey the HOA," is probably now watering his lawn somewhere far away, where there are no neighbors and no social media. Linda, the once powerful HOA president, moved out. Posted on Facebook, "I need time to heal." I agree. But the one who needs healing isn't her. It's the organization that once believed it could override the law, just because it had a logo embroidered on a polo shirt. Alyssa went back to work. She didn't tell the story at the office, didn't boast, didn't wear pride for having stood off against and outsmarted an armed HOA. Because to Alyssa, this wasn't a victory. It was a warning. You know what's truly scary, Dad? The people who aren't trained but genuinely believe they're protecting others. And when they get scared, they don't think, they shoot. And that almost cost me my daughter. All because one man was handed power without oversight. Because one HOA thought protecting the community meant playing TV cop. I'm not telling this story to seek justice. Carl was prosecuted. The HOA collapsed on its own. Our neighborhood woke up. I'm telling it because there are far too many Carls out there. They might not carry guns, but they carry something just as dangerous, the belief that they can't be wrong. They cloak themselves in words like safety, discipline, community rules. But in truth, they're just afraid of losing control over others. And when fear meets power, someone innocent always pays the price. That day, if Alyssa hadn't been a trained federal agent, if she'd flinched, if Carl had pulled the trigger, if the cops were 1 minute late, the viral video wouldn't have been about a standoff. It would have been a tragedy. And I might not be here telling you this story. So if you live in an HOA, if you've ever been threatened over a flag that's 5 degrees off, if you've ever heard the phrase, HOA rules are the highest law, remember this. It's the real laws that keep us safe, not illusions of authority. Don't let a plastic badge make you forget. Only those trained to protect should be allowed to act like protectors. What do you think? Did Carl deserve to be prosecuted? Should Alyssa have forgiven him? Have you ever met an HOA Karen like that? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you think this one was worth hearing, like, share, and ring the bell. Because here, we tell real stories. And no golf cart is needed to prove anything.